Welcome to episode 173 of the Half Point Per Podcast. I'm your host, Evan Riggs, joined as always by my co-host, Dalton Willie. Appreciate everybody's patience tonight. A little bit late, a couple changes on the back end of the old StreamYard that kind of threw us for a little bit of a loop. Dalton, I know it's been a while since we've been on, but it's the same as it ever was. I know you're pretty upset about Anthony Richardson as we head into this podcast. I think we're about an hour removed from him getting blindsided, and we see his pinky sideways on Twitter right now. I don't know, like on the scale of Jordy Nelson, your first-round pick, tearing his ACL while you're studying for the bar exam, to zero. This is for you on like the pain scale, but how are you feeling right now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited to sit down here today and talk about the 2026 season and Anthony Richardson's prospects as a starter when he goes to Minnesota, because the 2025 season's over for me. Most exciting player that I want to watch, that I need to be on the field, isn't going to be there. And you know, this is arguably the worst preseason ever. I had a few bets on Anthony Richardson on Underdog, a few little prop bets.
Tonight?
Yeah, tonight. Yeah, it's always good to get a little preseason action going.
That's what they say. Bet on preseason football anytime you get the chance.
Yeah, I didn't know David Ojabo was playing like it's a real game. I don't know what his problem is.
On that note, no Johnny tonight, obviously, as you all can see. We do have the Ranks Debate show tonight. It'll be obviously a little bit different with no Johnny as the judge to actually declare a winner. Be a little bit less formatted, a little bit less like Dalton and I giving like arguments as if we're in court and like a winner being declared like in years past, and a little bit more just, hey, Dalton has Baker Mayfield ranked 7th. Evan has him 13th, which is what we actually have. Like, let's talk about it. We'll go through a handful of guys and kind of talk in that format. First, though, before we get into that, I did just want to talk about the Rams for a very quick second, because one of the guys that popped up as a big difference for us was Puka Nacua. We kind of decided there wasn't a ton to talk about to like devote an entire debate section of the podcast for him. But obviously the Puka Nacua concern is all Matthew Stafford. I dropped him a little bit, a couple spots. I think I have him 8th. Dalton, I know you dropped him quite a bit, and then you did not really drop. Well, I don't know where you would have had Davante Adams ranked, I guess. But to my eye, that ranking looked about right for Davante Adams at 16. So kind of what was your rationale in punishing Puka more than Davante Adams for the Matthew Stafford uncertainty?
Yeah, I mean, anywhere around that Amon St. Brown, Neighbors, Thomas range is a first-round pick in fantasy right now, and I'm just not going to introduce that level of risk in the first round. I think I have Puka at wide receiver 14 and Adams at 16. Mm-hmm. I still think Puka has more to give, but we've seen Adams work under multiple QBs and still be way more than fantasy relevant on most seasons. Puka's archetype, the way he plays the game, he's big time on the contested catches. He plays really physical. So you just factor in the continued concerns with Puka's injury history, and that I haven't seen him do it with somebody else. It just got too rich for me to apprise him as a first-round pick, especially with Stafford going out and getting an epidural today. Like we did this once 2 years ago where Dak Prescott had like a mystery offseason, and then he ended up not playing for a period of time. And we've done this with Matt Stafford as well. So it's just worrisome enough that I would rather take somebody who I have a lot less questions about their offensive environment in the first round. But it's a way more satiating for me in rounds 2 and 3.
Yeah, I didn't even know epidural was a thing that athletes could do. But
I thought it was just for pregnant women.
Yeah, neither here nor there. I guess I would just say that I think Puka is just so good. Again, I dropped him a couple spots, just not as far as you. You know, I have him at 8. And I think I have Adams pretty similarly, maybe even the exact same as what you do. Yeah, I just think he's so. 16. Yeah, I just think he's so good that I'm fine introducing a little bit more risk. But I did drop him behind, the Malik Neighbors. I think I would have had him behind Amon-Ra St. Brown anyway. Nico Collins, Brian Thomas Jr. group. So dropped him a few spots. I'm just not quite as concerned about the different quarterback as it sounds like you are. Just thought it was worth getting your take on air. Obviously, we will continue to revisit the Rams situation as we need to. It sounds like they're hoping Stafford plays week 1. Obviously, Stafford has dealt with back stuff for a long time at this point. So tough to say what'll happen. On the one hand, obviously, he's familiar with it. That's cool. On the other hand, you don't like Stafford dealing with this over and over. And I mean, he's in his upper 30s, looked as immobile as ever last year. And you have to think this is probably a pretty big reason for that being the case. On that note, no, we'll jump right into the guys that we're really going to get after it on. And it's funny, this really was a total accident, but I went back and looked at as I was preparing last night. I think only one of these guys, maybe two, but I think one of these guys, you're higher than me. And that just is how it worked out, where our bigger disagreements were me being higher and you being lower. So it's going to be a lot of me being the sunshine pumper and a lot of you just crapping on my parade.
This is bullshit.
Luckily for you, we're not keeping score. No one's being actually declared a winner this time by impartial judge fans. So on that note, though, let's start in Tampa Bay. Baker Mayfield, and we'll get to Mike Evans, who we also have differing opinions on as well. Baker Mayfield, you have him at QB7. I have him at QB13. So one of the two guys, like Mike Evans being the other one, that you're actually higher than me on the player. So I'll let you give the positive Baker Mayfield spin to start us off here.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that are important with Baker. Last year, he finishes the QB4, which is his highest finish of any quarterback. In that time, though, there was a full 4-week span where he didn't have Chris Godwin or Mike Evans in the lineup, and Cade Otton was his primary target receiver. And he had a pretty good rushing season for a guy that we don't normally consider a good rusher. He had 378 yards and 3 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, and that's honestly part of what I kind of worry about a little bit, as we might see that take a step back.
Well, for me, it's that we've established that there's some potential there for his rushing upside, and that we know he can. He ended the season with the 3rd best completion percentage in the NFL, 3rd in yards, and 2nd in touchdowns. So he just had a career year. And generally, this is a situation I would be scared off of because we're watching them transition again to a new offensive coordinator. But Grizzard called a lot of the plays for Baker last year. This is honestly,
he was pretty involved in 3rd downs, is kind of what I could gather.
Yeah. And this is honestly like one of the better end-to-end receiving rooms in the NFL. Like not top-end talent, but you go all the way down to wide receiver 4 where you have Jalen McMillan, who had flashes last year. Rashad White's been a fine pass-catching back, and Bucky is Bucky, and then Cade Otton is a just fine tight end. So they just go deeper, so I like that. Only big concern I have with where Tampa Bay goes is that Tristan Wirfs injury and how long he's out for. That's obviously a big concern.
Yeah, I think for me, being on the negative side, it was really so I don't know if you saw this from Christopher Harris Football, in his fantasy draft almanac. He tweeted out this screenshot. It's a research project on Baker Mayfield. How do older breakout QBs fare the following season? And I'm trying to see since 2001. So here are the quarterbacks who posted their first top 10 fantasy season in their 6th season or later. And I'm going to assume, because I think Baker actually was top 10 the previous year in like weeks 1 through 17. Perhaps he was using the whole season, and that bumped him down. Either way, the following year, Jay Fielder, Matt Hasselbeck, Jake Delhomme, Matt Schaub, Alex Smith, Geno Smith. That's the list of guys since 01. They finished 25th, 13th, 12th, 9th, 31st for Alex Smith in 2017, by the way, which is crazy.
What did he break his leg that year?
No, that was his last year on the Chiefs.
Oh, was that the no wide receiver touchdowns year?
Maybe. That was the Chiefs start really well and then lose like 5 straight games in the middle of the season year. And then Geno Smith went from 5th to 19th. And I don't like say that to say that's a death knell for Baker Mayfield, but that was kind of something before I even found that was in the back of my mind. This guy, before he got to Tampa Bay and really before he got to the Rams, was borderline out of the league. And like we've seen this with Geno Smith, where guys can come back and continue to be good for multiple years. And like I have him 13th. I'm not saying he's undraftable. But I do just worry a little bit that we've seen the absolute ceiling and we might get a little bit of a falling back down the earth for Baker this season. And one other interesting thing, his 2 years in Tampa Bay, he's been absurdly efficient in the red zone. So he has 0.42 points per drop back outside of the red zone each of the last 2 years, which both of those are tied for the best in his career, but they aren't like markedly the best in his career. He's in that neighborhood in one or two of those Cleveland years. In the red zone, though, 1.34 2 years ago, 2.44 last year. So I mean, they were absurdly efficient. He threw for so many touchdowns in the red zone. I mean, 29 passing touchdowns last year, 8 more than any other season of his career. Obviously, you mentioned it, Liam Cohen, a big part of that, but they do have Josh Grizzard keeping that continuity. So I don't want to ding him too much for the offensive coordinator change, but I am just a little bit concerned we might see some regression in a couple of those areas. And another way that the Bucs were actually really, really good last year was in the screen game. They were the best in the NFL at 0.25 EPA per screen pass last season. And it was the first time in Baker's career to have over 50% of his passing yards come after the catch. And to me, I know he only played half the season. That feels like a big time Chris Godwin stat. And we don't have a feel for what Godwin will look like when he's back, and frankly, when he will actually be back.
He'll be fine.
I hope so.
No, and I am baking in some of that regression. I'm taking him down QB7, and I do have concerns. I think part of that high red zone efficiency, though, is just the weapons he's given. I mean, you have Mike Evans, you have Chris Godwin, and now you have Mika. And I mean, Bucky Irving, honestly, great screen game merchant. And before that, Rachaad White even did a good one of it. I would be curious about where Harmon got those stats or Harris got those stats, because he was QB 10 last year as well, but I'm assuming that's coming from the 17 game season, and his last game might have bumped him over.
Yeah, perhaps. I don't know. Because like I said, I did look, and he was, I believe, like QB 9 or 10. And I can't remember if it was 17 or 18. Regardless, so it's close enough to that where it is like it's always a little bit of a concern. It's kind of like the Cordero Patterson, where it's like the guy breaks out and is awesome for a year or two, and it's like, okay, is he really going to keep doing that, or are we going to kind of see him come back to earth to the player that we've seen? Which, again, I have QB 13, so I think Baker's going to continue to be a good player. QB 7 is just maybe a little bit close to the ceiling that I see for him, and then really, honestly, it's probably even less of a anti-Baker thing and more of a like, I'm still a big believer in Justin Herbert. Kyler Murray's got the rushing. He always has, and, probably will for a couple more years yet. Jordan Love, like, big believer in him. Brock Purdy, I think the 49ers probably in for a bounce back year. And then the one that I know you don't agree with, but I've always been higher than you, is CJ Stroud. I have him at QB 12. So it's just like I started off with Baker at like 8, and then I kept moving him down. It's like, well, I think this guy's better, and this guy's it's really close between once you get past Burrow and then really Mahomes, probably right after that, there's definitely a drop off.
Yeah, there's definitely like a tier of like, I would take any of these guys. And in spite of my QB7 ranking, I would likely wait in a draft more often than not on Baker. Like, I'm not flying by the seat of my pants to take him, but I think his optimal outcomes, I think he has a better shot at it. And we'll talk about the Arizona offense later than some of those other offenses. And I'm scared for CJ Stroud's life behind that current line.
What do you mean? What do you mean? Their line's fine.
You trade your best offensive lineman and then don't draft a blue chip tackle and trade him to the Chiefs. Love it.
So Mike Evans, you have him wide receiver 17. I have him 27. I can lead off here. And again, this, when I initially made my ranks, was less of an anti Mike Evans and more just like there's a lot. It just is pretty flat in this range. But kind of looking back at last year, you look back at those first 7 games when Godwin was healthy. Evans was the wide receiver 14, which is good, obviously outperforming even your rank. But he also had 3 games of fewer than 6 points, which is kind of the Mike Evans experience, but was maybe even a little bit more up and down than usual. The beginning of the season, obviously Godwin gets hurt. Evans did miss time later on in the season, but did get more volume his way than he was early in the season. I think I heard earlier today he was only on track for like 110 targets, while Godwin was on track for 150 targets in the games they played together. I just don't know what to think about this receiving group in general. Honestly, like they re-signed Chris Godwin, so you think, okay, he's fine. He has the surgery in the summer, which they say was not a surprise. I didn't see that coming.
Well, they even said if they would have won their first playoff game, there was potential for Chris Godwin to return
Yeah,
in the playoffs last year.
Yeah, and I mean, so that to me, I guess, I don't know if that means he had a setback and had to have surgery, or if like he could have somehow played but not had a crazy injury risk, but he knew he was going to have cleanup surgery in the offseason. Why they would wait until later in the summer to have it, I don't know. So there's a lot of weirdness going on there. So it's like, okay, did they draft Emeka Egbuka because they're unsure of Chris Godwin, but they just paid Chris Godwin? Are they kind of hedging against the Mike Evans age cliff? He's going into his age 32 season, obviously has been doing 1,000 yards every year for a decade. Like, I don't know. I'm not opposed to drafting Mike Evans. I just, with the age concerns, and I do have more Baker concerns than you do, I just couldn't quite get him up to the point that you could. And I mean, I do like Emeka Egbuka. I do like Jalen McMillan as like a complimentary player. Egbuka, we'll see. It just kind of seems like a lot of times in these situations when like you draft a guy like that in the first round and it's, for the future, a lot of times that future comes quicker than you expect. And I'm not saying he's going to be wide receiver 1 or even 2 on the team this season. That will depend on when Chris Godwin gets back. He just could be enough of a thorn in the side to be an issue for the top 2 guys.
Yeah, a couple of things for me. First, I just want you to know that your ranking would be Mike Evans' lowest outcome ever in his career.
Yeah, I mean, but he's 32. He's hurt his hamstring in 5 consecutive seasons and 6 of the last 7. I just like we're stacking hamstring injuries,
and he still has produced. Some fun stats about him last year. He was 14th in the ASS rating from fantasy points, which is average separation.
Yeah. So I was gonna make the joke that Mike Evans' ass still looked pretty good last year.
It did. His average depth of target was 15. He's still like an ideal perimeter X player. His red zone target percentage, he has a conversion percentage of 62.8%. So like those red zone targets almost always come into his hands and he catches them even in contested catch situations. And I'm not like entirely concerned about Emeka. The majority of people whom I trust have been like, you are not playing this guy X receiver. That is not his role. And he could do it. But
yeah, no, I'm not concerned about him playing X receiver and like taking his job. My concern would just be the volume distribution changes a little bit in the offense if he is like good and ready to go right off the bat,
Yeah, and for me, it's just Mike Evans has never been like a premier target hog. Like his highest target season would have been 2016 when he had 173, but since then he's like soundly between 100 and 130 every season.
That had to have been a Jameis Winston year.
Oh, it absolutely was. He was wide receiver 1 that year. It was the 50-50 touchdown interception season for Jameis Winston. One of the most electric seasons ever. And so he's never been a guy who needs to have a high target share because of how he earns his targets, which are those deep 20-yarders, those deep touchdown passes, which may breed a little inconsistency in the game, especially as he ages. But I still think that the volume will be there and the success for him will be there.
Yeah, the thing I worry about with him more than like Devonta Adams is that if he loses a half a step, I just think Mike Evans is the type of receiver that it's going to go quicker for him. than like a Devontae Adams, like true technician, get open that way kind of guy, as opposed to Mike Evans, who's this big, strong, fast, contested catch guy.
As long as he matches up against Marshawn Lattimore once a season, that dog stays in him. I mean,
okay, on to Detroit, the other QB receiver disagreement that we have. We'll start quarterback again with Jared Goff. I'll let you kick off with the negative, Dalton. I have him as QB7, so exactly where you have Baker Mayfield. You have him at QB15. Why the hate on Jared Goff, who is leading the NFL in touchdown passes over the last 3 years?
Yeah, not a ton of hate for him as much as a lot of discouraging signs occurring in Detroit. So just like out of the gun, I want to start off with, unlike Tampa Bay that we just talked about, this team had some massive turnover. You have both the offensive coordinator and the defensive coordinator leaving for head coaching jobs. Ben Johnson, probably the most close household name of any offensive coordinator in the NFL at the time because of how successful he's been. Then they lose their, out of nowhere, for a matter of fact, just on a random day in the middle of the summer, Frank Ragnow, who is probably the best or the second best center in the league.
Give Creed Humphrey his respect.
Or third best. Just retires out of nowhere. And they currently have a battle between a 6th rounder and a journeyman for the center position. And Kevin Zeitler ends up going to the Tennessee Titans. So the stalwart offensive line that they've used that is really pivotal in a lot of like the swing game and the screen game that they run out of Detroit has some holes in it. And then it's just very important to talk about Jared Goff last year and why I'm going to bake in regression. He played 15 of his 17 games in a dome, and his dome and outside splits are absolutely they're huge. His dome stats.
Have you? But before you start talking, have you watched Quarterback on Netflix yet?
No. Do they talk about this?
Yeah, a little bit, and he's very aware of the conversation about this, and I think even Kay Adams at the premiere maybe asked him about it because his record in below X degrees is actually really good, and so that's something that got brought up, and it's like, no one talks about that.
That's hilarious. But when he's outside, his stats, he drops his completion percent by a full 6%. His turnover percent goes from 2.1 all the way up to 6. I'm not going to inflate the stats because he's obviously played more outdoor games. So his touchdowns, though, he has 87 touchdowns in a dome in significantly less games to his 103 touchdowns outdoors. So there's a lot of variance that occurs with Jared Goff in these dome games. They only get 6 dome games this year. So it's not as good as you would like to see it. And then just in general.
Wait. Hold on. There's no way they only have 6 dome games this year. They play in a dome.
I Googled it, and the AI summary said 6 games.
there's no way that's true. I'll go count that in a minute. So the Kay Adams stat that she put out, since 2022, he's 4-1 with the 4th highest passer rating in the NFL when the temperature is below freezing.
So they have 14 dome games, according to the other AI summary.
That's a little different. Let me just pull up their schedule. Do this the old-fashioned way.
Well, their away games, they play Houston, Indy, Minnesota, Dallas, New Orleans, Atlanta, who are all domes. I know that off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought the number was a little lower. But regardless, I'm going to bake that regression in there. And then I think we'll talk about this on JMO as well. Outside of the 2 players I consider elite on this team, which are Jahmyr Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown, I'm generally baking in a lot of regression on the Lions. I think it's going to be really hard for them to be a top 5 offense with some of their departures. And I really believe Campbell is a good coach, and a lot of that offensive scheming comes from him. But the reason I mentioned losing the defensive coordinator on the onset here is he is imparting a lot of judgment on both sides of the ball, and it's going to ideally, probably more than likely, split his focus amongst it. And I'll be questioning how well their offense can continue to thrive. And them being a top 10 offense instead of a top 5 does significantly change things because they were the league leader in touchdowns last year.
Yeah. I do still think they can be a top 5 offense. I mean, yes, they lose Frank Ragnow. That matters. It is easier to cover on the inside than if they let's say Tristan Wirfs retired from Tampa Bay right now. That would matter more than losing Ragnow. Obviously, losing Ragnow does matter, probably the most for David Montgomery, maybe. I don't know. It's hard to kind of parse out who that matters most for, because it does matter for Goff. Like, we know one thing about Goff is that if he faces quick pressure, he can struggle, make bad decisions, kind of fold under that. I just have enough faith in the Lions. They're gonna scheme it up. I mean, we don't know. Maybe one of the guys, whoever wins the job, he's not gonna be an all-pro, but maybe he's league average, and league average still probably makes that a pretty good offensive line. And I think they just have enough weapons. Like, you talked about Tampa Bay's receiver room. The Lions, just their weapons, like the entire offense, it's probably them and the Eagles. If you're just looking at the entire, running back, tight end, receiver room, it's probably those two teams as the top in the NFL right now. And Jared Goff, to me, he's not an elite quarterback, but I think he's like pretty firmly in the very good quarterback at this point. He's prone to mistakes if he's pressured, like I said, but compare him to a guy like Kirk Cousins in his prime, I think he's better than Kirk Cousins.
You're going to come at Kirk O'Bangs like that?
He just like, he's kind of the ultimate safety net at quarterback right now. I mean, he's thrown for over 4,400 yards 3 years in a row. You can basically chalk up 30 passing touchdowns for him every year in Detroit. He's only been below 3,800 passing yards 2 times in his career, once as a rookie when he barely played, and then his first year in Detroit where he went to a terrible team that was not ready to be a functional offense yet. And yet, when Dan Campbell started calling plays the second half of the season in that year, they did finish as a top 15 offense in that stretch. And I say that to say, and again, I know that you aren't forecasting Ben Johnson like leaving a gaping hole that they're just like clueless without him. But I do think that's probably a pretty strong narrative out there right now. Like Tampa Bay, they have promoted from within. They don't have to just shred the playbook when Ben Johnson left. They can keep it. They can still use it. They can build off of it, do a lot of the same concepts. I don't know. I just think this offense and this ecosystem is so good that I've got no problem taking Jared Goff, pretty firmly inside the top 10 and feeling pretty safe that I have a QB1 producer at the very least.
Yeah, and I think the difference, just kind of to put a bow on it, between you with Jared Goff and me with Baker, is that I'm betting that rushing upside continues with Baker and gives me a safer floor, and you're betting that Jared Goff just continues to be a above average passer at a minimum, and that offense continues to produce TDs out of it.
I think that's really the biggest thing, is I'm betting that this offense is going to continue to be a top 5 unit in the NFL. Because, I mean, the coordinator definitely matters, but the players still matter more. And they've got, like I said, about as good as it gets in the NFL, just skill position wise. So good that like Jahmyr Gibbs is sharing a backfield 50-50, and I really considered ranking him number 1 overall.
So did I. I actually thought you were going to use that so good to transition us right into Jameson Williams.
That would have been a lot smarter, but I could do that now. So Jameson Williams, I have him at wide receiver 26. You have him at wide receiver 37. And I guess off the top, what I'll say is I do agree with you that Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jahmyr Gibbs, feeling pretty good about those two guys. And honestly, like, this is a crutch argument. I'm not saying this is going to be what happens, but if they have less of a command in these games and they have to throw the ball more and throw it to Amon-Ra St. Brown more and maybe use Jahmyr Gibbs a little bit more, like they're pressed a little bit more in these games, that could end up being good for those guys. Like, the only issue for those guys last year was they blew out teams too often, and every now and then it got spread around just a little bit too much, where it's like, oh, I got the everybody scored game, but Amon-Ra St. Brown went 3 for 30. Like, what the, like that happened a couple times, and that's like the only issue with those guys. Jameson Williams, I think, was wide receiver 19 last year, so I am forecasting a little bit of a drop off for him with this rank. He had the most fantasy points per game on deep play action passes in the NFL. He's tied with Jordan Addison in that stat, and deep is quantified as 15 yards or more. Like, to me, that is a staple part of this offense that I don't think that's going away. I think it's the run game. It is the digs, like those timing throws that Jared Goff is so good at, and it's those deep play action shots. And Jamison Williams is clearly the guy with that. And honestly, what might determine if he, outside of how good the offense is, what might determine his season this year is, does he take a step forward as far as route tree and usage and like more consistent volume? Because I think he only had 5 receptions. You may have the stat being the negative side. He only had 5 receptions a couple times. Didn't have a ton of targets, but he was such a big play guy last year that it just didn't matter. But what if they use him a little bit more on the outside? I mean, they're talking like they might. Obviously, it's just talk right now. We'll see. But I still have that to say, I'm willing to kind of build in that upside with this rank and give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, because he did improve a lot from the previous year to last year. He's still a very young player. He's very talented, a guy that we both liked, a fair bit coming out of college. Like, I'm going to bet on the young ascending player and what I still think is one of the best offenses in the NFL.
Yeah, so my argument really comes down to a couple of things with him. This is like the Will Fuller of this generation, which I find funny considering how I'm treating him right now.
He's better than Will Fuller.
Will Fuller had a top 10 season. Jameson Williams hasn't done that yet. But anyways, he had like some of the most wild variants of any player, especially a player to finish like he did. If you just look, it's like a full 9-point difference in standard scoring. He's like wide receiver 13, and PPR he's like 22, which is some of the biggest variance I've seen out of it. He only had a 17% target share last year and a 20% target per route run and an 11 red zone targets on 15 games. In his performances, 8 out of the 15 he played, he didn't post a top 24 wide receiver game. So he was really like hit or miss. And as I was going through my rankings, I was like, it's just really hard for me to justify like taking that kind of player, because you're going to be rolling the dice every week with him. And there are just some more consistent players that I was putting above him where I was like, yeah, DK Metcalf is probably going to be pretty frustrating, or Jacoby Myers is never going to score you more than 15 points a game, but he's also never going to score you 0 points a game. And so when I was looking at that, it was pretty difficult for me to put him much higher on the way he scored his points last year and then the way he received his targets. Like, he's still not dominating in some of the stats that you want him to be. Like, if he had a higher target share, I'd feel a little more comfortable, or if he had more end zone targets. But he really is just a good sacrificial X receiver right now for the Detroit Lions.
That also makes a lot of big plays. It's funny, you said DK Metcalf, and I was like, wait a minute. So I went and looked. I don't have DK Metcalf ranked right now. That's not intentional. He should be probably somewhere in my top 30.
Nope, Greg's debate. Ad hoc debate. Evan didn't rank DK Metcalf in the top 40. Please explain.
With that being said, I don't know. I'd have a really tough time picking between DK Metcalf and Jamison Williams. Like, I just do not want to deal with DK Metcalf dealing with Arthur Smith and Aaron Rodgers all season. Like, give me about anything else. And I'd prefer it, I think.
I don't know if you saw, I'm sure we'll wrap it up with this one. But at Steelers practice, they went in a bunch 4 tight end formation that went into a 5 out wide formation where it was DK Metcalf and 4 tight ends spread out wide. And yeah, I am really excited to see that in an NFL game and to see the response from Aaron Rodgers and Arthur Smith on that one.
Did you see that he said that Roman Wilson is so deep in his own head, he's trying to please Aaron Rodgers that he's overthinking it?
Oh, well, I mean, he's probably not wrong, which is the worst part.
And like, Aaron, I wonder why somebody would feel that way.
Maybe you're really difficult to deal with.
Okay, on to Aaron Rodgers' rival, in quotations, and the Chicago Bears. Colston Loveland. I have him at tight end 8. You have him at tight end 14. I don't actually know what his ADP is. I can maybe find that in just a second. I'll go real quick here. I don't feel super passionately, like don't have a ton of, data. I mean, this is a rookie. Don't have a ton of data that I'm using to back this up here. But here's kind of my thought process. Basically, you have the top 3 tight ends. You have Kelsey or Andrews, like in that order at 4 or 5. Then after that, it's like, okay, like, what are we doing here? Like you don't feel good about anybody else. So I thought, why not rank a guy who seems to be pretty darn good prospect, who seems to have pretty quickly supplanted Cole Kmet as at least the 1A, maybe just the 1, but I think for sure the 1A in this offense, run by Ben Johnson, who I think knows how to use tight ends. Like, I would just rather take that risk than like draft Evan Ingram, even if Evan Ingram ends up finishing higher. Like, I know who he is. Colston Loveland could be the tight end 3 this year, and it wouldn't be shocking because of the athletic upside, because of his offensive coordinator. Like, we'll see what Caleb Williams can bring to that mix this year. The thing about tight end, that like if I mess up at tight end 8, and you probably don't have to draft him quite at tight end 8, maybe like 10 or 11.
That is actually his exact ADP. I was going to tell you 10 in standard, 11 in PPR.
Wow, that's funny. Like if you're taking him there, if he's horrible, just drop him, pick up somebody else. So like I feel like it's a pretty low risk, high reward play here.
Yeah, I do want to just point out to the listeners that Evan does make the bottom cards for the pod, and he does have Colston Loveland ranked higher, and he does have Colston Loveland's name spelled incorrectly.
I know. I knew what I got up there.
But I think this came from you and I probably evaluate the tight end position a little differently. Like, if I'm taking one of these mid-round ho-hum guys, which honestly, my tight end 8 through probably 20, you could interchange, and I wouldn't like have a strong opinion for the majority of them.
He doesn't have an E in his name. Maybe I should drop him for that. This looks worse. The E looked better.
He does not have an E. It's Colston. But it's just how I approach tight end position. Like, if I'm taking one of these mid-round guys, I really just want it to be a sit it and forget it every week, and I don't want to be like scouring the waiver wire for tight end matchups. It's really not the way I like to play fantasy football. And then for second season in a row, there's a lot of heavy stock being invested in the Chicago Bears offense across the board.
Yeah, real quick before you get too far removed from that, I feel like I'm probably thinking about that differently. Like, I'm not thinking about it as I'm going to be scouring the waiver wire for the whole season. My hope is like, okay, there's always guys 15 to 20 who pop and they're like tight end 6. Like maybe I can find one of those guys in the first couple weeks, that's kind of my thought process there.
Yeah. And my thinking is I just never want to zero in it. And I do think that's like within the range of outcomes. It's a couple 0 weeks for Colston Loveland. Not that he's a total 0. Just with this Chicago Bears offense, there's so many. And I hate the mouse to feed argument, but legitimately from Rome to DJ to DeAndre Swift to Luther Burden.
You said DeAndre Swift's name before Luther Burden. What is?
Luther Burden needs to be on the field healthy before he gets better name recognition. There's just a lot going on here, and the tight end position is it's so hard to learn in the NFL that some players just take longer, and that's not really indicative of like bad talent or anything else other than there's just more to learn. So it's a combination of I don't want to over leverage myself on too many of these Bears again. I think they're going to be a good offense, but some of the way people have this offense, and I'm not saying you ranked, requires them to break a couple of records, including more than 4,000 passing yards in a season. So him and Tyler Warren, I took a little lower just because they're rookies, and it's like I'm not gonna get myself into that debacle where I'm waiting to see if it's going to happen. And I would rather take my shots and be excited about Rome Odunze and Luther Burden in this offense before like the ancillary pass catching options like Cole Kmet and Colston Loveland.
That's a professional podcaster right there. We're going to skip. Don't let me forget to go back to the guy prior. We're going to skip right ahead to Rome Odunze and stay in Chicago here. Dalton has him at wide receiver 32, which again, I think is probably more in line if I had to guess with ADP, or are we kind of splitting the difference on ADP?
No, you know what my top note is here? I'm still 17 spots higher on his ADP than the market. And I'm coming on here having to be like, I don't know about this Rome guy. No,
Wait,
I'm
so
saying
you're 17 spot like receiver or just like total ranks?
receiver.
So he's wide receiver 49.
Yes.
Well, I think we've found one of my guys, another one who we are not talking about this week. So I have two receivers already as my guys.
So I just want to get that one off my chest because when I was doing my rankings, I was like, oh, we're being a little aggressive here. And then you put yours out, and you're like, we're gonna argue over Roma Dunze. And I was like, okay. Because I'd even like dropped DJ Moore a few spots in my rankings because I was like, Roma Dunze, I think, has a really good shot at taking over this offense. He's a really good player.
Yeah.
And you just come out here and you had to 8 spots up me.
Yeah, he's at wide receiver 24 for me. And I did like a both brave and stupid thing and a very cowardly thing. I, did like I told you, this is like a call my shot type of rank. I have him at wide receiver 24. But I have DJ Moore at 23. So I still have DJ Moore one spot ahead of him. I should distract Rome ahead of him just so I could say I did it. But I have Rome 24, clearly way higher than the market. I did do a mock draft this morning just to like put myself in the real decision-making process for the first time. You'll laugh at this one. I was staring at Roma Dunze versus Chris Olave in, I think, the 5th round. I took Roma Dunze. I felt really horrible about it because all I was thinking about was the bright side of Chris Olave and not all of the terrible concussions that he's had in the last couple of years. Yeah. But go ahead, Dalton. Tell us why you hate Roma Dunze at wide receiver 32.
I don't hate Roma Dunze. I think this is like a pretty good spot for him, in my opinion. I'll defend where I ranked him.
Okay.
Because getting up to that wide receiver 2 production, like there were so many holes in the Chicago offense last year and so many problems, like Caleb Williams watching film by himself, that and I think this is a good expectation to have, is to sit down and say, this is Caleb Williams' rookie season. Like he's been acclimated to the NFL, but he did not get proper coaching.
It's kind of like the Trevor Lawrence, Urban Meyer year a little bit.
And I'm not saying like we forget everything he did last year, but there was a lot of bad on Trevor Lawrence's tape that he needs coached out of him that I think Ben Johnson will coach out of him. But when you get
you mean Caleb Williams.
Yeah. But I think like I'm putting him as like a high-end wide receiver 3. He still has a lot of competition because DJ Moore is a really, really good wide receiver. It is the off the field stuff that is really concerning at this point with DJ Moore, alongside some of the comments from Ben Johnson.
To be clear, when you say off the field, it's like attitude stuff within the team, not like legal stuff.
Yeah. He sat on a bench mid-game last year. I mean, while the offense was still playing.
Told Tyler Bagent that we need you out there.
Yeah. So like definitely there's also the opportunity that continues to be a problem and Ben Johnson doesn't do it and Rome becomes the alpha wide receiver 1. But if you fix those things, it's pretty hard for me to argue that DJ Moore is not like a top 15 wide receiver at skill in the NFL. And what we saw from Rome last year was really exciting. He did a lot of things really good. And I'm just baking him in as like a high-end wide receiver 3 who would be the second receiving option on a team that I expect to be like a middle-of-the-road offense while they figure things out halfway through the season.
Yeah, for me, this is probably like, again, I will not tell anybody to draft him at wide receiver 24. This is just where I have him ranked. The reason why I have him up here is that I just was such a believer in him as a prospect, and I know last year wasn't great. There were a lot of very loud mistakes in the form of miscommunications, mostly between he and Caleb. I'm going to assume those weren't all Caleb's fault. And I'm going to assume those were all Roma Dunze's fault. Matt Harmon did have him graded out pretty poorly against zone coverage. Said that's basically the only area where he's concerned. Didn't show a great feel. A lot of miscommunications, like I said, between he and Caleb Williams. Didn't know like where to sit down, where to kind of find the holes. Wasn't very good there. What I do like, you bring in Luther Burden. You already have DJ Moore. You should have a pure X receiver in Roma Dunze, and that is what he was legitimately awesome at last year. 71st percentile against man coverage is pretty good. 87th percentile against press coverage in reception perception last year. That is really good. That's like star level good as a rookie, and you assume that number will continue to get a little bit better. I also found this interesting. I found this tweet today from Ron Stewart. He tweeted out the next gen stats best receiver prospects since 2007, and it was just basically like combine measurements, like athleticism taken into account with college production, taken into account with draft scores. So again, like not drawing any grand conclusions that this means this, but he was number 2 on that list behind Calvin Johnson, ahead of Malik Nabers at 3, Julio Jones at 4, Jamar Chase at 5. And yes, this is not like foolproof. It's not all freaks on here. Corey Davis, Brandon Cooks, Devontae Parker, Sammy Watkins, Amari Cooper, and then Justin Jefferson. So like there's some
misses. Led with the good. I like it.
Yeah, there's some misses as you get later on in that. But I will say, like, the thing Rome Odunze showed that like Corey Davis and Devontae Parker, the 2 biggest busts on that list, did not show is the ability to separate and to get open, especially against man or press man coverage. And I just really want to see him as the pure outside X receiver. And I found a quote from Ben Johnson in late July that he's pretty much saying that Rome Odunze is like the prototypical X receiver, detailed route runner, a lot of ways he can win, really good contested catch guy. He got so few layup opportunities last year, like slot, flat, screen passes. Like, give him a couple more of those, improve a little bit against zone coverage. Like, there's a lot of meat on the bone for Rome Odunze, and I just really think this guy is going to be a star at some point in the NFL. So this is me trying to, get in early on the Rome Odunze hype train. I also just insane stat from Rich Rebar, Lord Reeves on Twitter. I don't know if you've seen this. He ran 144 routes last year where there was not even a target on the play. Not that he wasn't targeted, where there was not even a target. Like, you talked about Caleb Williams, like this is basically his rookie year. I mean, Rome Odunze played all over the place last year, which is kind of good, but also shows that there was no vision, no thought. Like, just this was a horrifically run offensive unit last year, and it affected Rome Odunze just as much as Caleb Williams for a lot of the year.
Yeah, and that's why we're both higher on ADP for Rome Odunze. I guess it just depends on how high you want to go.
Yeah, it does. Okay, let's go back to a rookie in Ashton Jeanty. I'm surprised by this. I thought we would kind of both be in lockstep. I think his ADP is like running back 4 or 5. I docked him a few spots to running back 8, have a couple of vets. Like, I don't think Derrick Henry is probably ahead of him everywhere. I have Derrick Henry ahead of him. I can't remember if Breece Hall is 1 spot ahead or 1 spot behind, but he's right there. And he definitely is not. Breece Hall is like very low right now in a lot of ranks. I think I also put maybe Devon Achane ahead of him too, but you have him at running back 14, Dalton. So I don't know if you're a lot more concerned or like about the situation, about the player, just don't want to bet on the rookies. Tell me what the Ashton Jeanty pause is from you.
Well, I didn't look at ADP before I did this, and I felt like I was pretty in line with where I was ranking him. And I thought I was being like pretty generous with my ranking. I mean, the 2 guys that I have directly above him who I could see him jumping are James Cook and Kyron Williams. But after that, Bucky Irving, Chase Brown, Devon Achane, Breece Hall, and Jonathan Taylor are guys that I don't think I will. Some of this comes down to offensive environment. I know there's a lot of enthusiasm for Chip Kelly's return to the NFL, but he runs an incredibly fast offense, and that's kind of like not his gimmick, but the way they play the game. But this is an offensive line last year that ranked 26th in run block win rate. And that's a stat that doesn't evaluate the running backs behind the line because we know how bad those running backs were last year. Their inability to block, they didn't really add to that room. And we're walking into an offense that I still think is missing like real downfield threat options. I mean, you have Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers, completely excellent. He's my tight end 1. He's your tight end 1. But Jacoby Myers, Jack Beck, and now we're getting like a ton of Trey Tucker hype right now because they don't have anybody else in that X position. and I'm worried about how
I,
often.
I don't think you said their best X receiver's name yet.
Who?
Deontay Thornton is probably
Oh,
going
you're
to
right.
be
Deontay Thornton, Santana Moss.
he's going to be their starting X receiver. He's not Santana Moss, but I actually think he's probably going to be their starter at X.
That's what Geno Smith called him.
Oh
But yeah, that's where we're at right now. And so I just have some concerns about how often he's going to see boxes that aren't stacked. And I have some concerns about the line he's going to be running behind. I don't think this Raiders offensive unit is going to be particularly good next year. And so when you look at some of the guys I'm putting above him, I'm just picking players in better offenses, excluding, you could argue, Jonathan Taylor and Breece Hall. But both of those guys are proven commodities at this point that I'm willing to take higher than him. But yeah, all in all, I thought my ranking was like pretty fair of him, which is a really high end RB2. But I do think he's going to have some tough games. And I do wonder how effective he's going to be transitioning to the NFL level in an offense that looks to run some of the most plays in the NFL just because of how Chip Kelly plays. That's a big adjustment for anybody to play the NFL level and then to play the game at a faster pace than most guys.
So we'll see what Chip Kelly in the NFL looks like this time around. What I will say is at Ohio State last year specifically, they did not play as fast. I mean, they still played with a decent pace, but he did slow it down and he did like run more motion stuff and like counters and gap scheme and like creative running, rushing attack. Again, we'll see what it looks like in the NFL. But Ohio State was definitely not. I mean, they were not the Oregon teams that we remember, and even the NFL where they're up there on the line snapping. So we'll see what that looks like in the NFL. One thing that I do like about the Chip Kelly offense for Ashton Jeanty is when he was in the NFL, he definitely wanted to do two things: run the ball and throw the ball deep. And I do think like Beck is a guy who, decent down the field, not great. Bowers as a tight end can probably go downfield better than just about anybody in the NFL, maybe like George Kittle is the other guy at this point. Trey McBride too, being another. They also have Santana Moss, Deontay Thornton, apparently, who I think is going to be a nice downfield threat. I mean, like, in his time as a play caller in the NFL, 2013 to 2016, his teams were in the top 11 in rush attempts all of those years per game. They were in the top 7 3 times. Of course, part of that, they ran a lot of plays, but they did still like to run the ball. They definitely fed LaShawn McCoy for a couple of years there, and he had probably his best season under Chip Kelly, which, again, like LaShawn McCoy is awesome. So it doesn't mean that Ashton Jeanty is going to get that. That's not what I'm saying. But I do think the fact, like he and Pete Carroll, I think have this fixed vision of, okay, we're going to establish the run and kind of build the pass game off of the run. That's how Pete Carroll's kind of always been comfortable playing. We've seen that for a decade. And I think Chip Kelly kind of showed the same thing in his time in the NFL. And like, this is still below, I think, what his ADP is. Like I said, I think he's probably closer to 8 overall than the RB8. But I do still think there's a lot of positives working in Ashton Jeanty's favor, where he could live up to that 8 overall. I have him more kind of at what I think is maybe the middle ground. Kind of this guy, I know the term generational prospect gets used a lot, but Saquon, Todd Gurley, Bajan, is that how we're saying his name now? Is that what we got? All I think he said that we've all been saying his name wrong, and it's Bajan, which he should
like
not
Honey
have.
Dijon?
Well, no, because we were saying Bijan because he did a Honey Dijon mustard like deal, and everyone's like, "Okay, man, you probably shouldn't have done that if your name is Bajan." Like you're really confusing us. But anyway, like this dude, elite prospect, passes the eye test. At Boise State last year, he forced 151 missed tackles. Over the last 2 years, he's caught near 70 passes, which in college is a lot over a 2-year stretch, for like 600, 700 yards. He can legitimately be a true 3-down back. And also there's nobody else in this Raiders backfield who I think is any good. Don't give me So don't give me Raheem Mostert, please.
I don't even know who else is in this backfield. I'm going to be completely honest with you.
Well, is Zamir White still there?
God, I hope not.
I know Amir Abdullah is, I think, on the 49ers because he's popping up as like the RB2 or 3 because, as usual, everybody behind Christian McCaffrey is dying right now. This Raiders offensive line, they were dead last in rushing yards per game last year. The running backs were a big reason for that. The O-line was a big reason for that. I do think the O-line, I wouldn't say it's good, probably would categorize it as improving. But like for him to be 8 overall, I think the O-line is probably an obstacle there. But they do at least with the combination of Geno Smith. We both like Jacoby Myers as a player. We both like Brock Bowers. They have some other interesting receivers. This passing game will actually be a respectable passing game as opposed to like the Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell, whatever they've been throwing out there these past couple of years. So I think combine that with just the talent of the prospect, and also like you think back to Bijan Robinson, there's no Tyler Algier on this team. There's no Arthur Smith coaching this team who's going to give somebody else half of the touches. I don't think so. I think my price, like in my mind, balances out the risk of him being a rookie, taking some time to acclimate, maybe the offensive line not being fantastic, with the upside of he could legitimately be one of the best 3 running backs in the NFL a month into the season if he's as good as a lot of the draft guys say he is.
Yeah, I'm just thinking back to the season Saquon had in New York where he couldn't even look like an elite player because of how bad that offensive environment is. And that's where some of my concern comes from.
Well, his rookie year was his best season until last year.
True, his rookie year. There's some seasons in between that I think we're forgetting about.
Like Geno Smith is much better than anything they had at quarterback during any of those times.
I think I could stomach moving him up to RB12, which would put him at the low end of top 12.
So on Fantasy Pros, he's 5, running back 5, and 10 overall right now.
That's
he's ahead of Christian McCaffrey. Wow.
That's absolutely insane in so many ways. And again, it's just I don't think the offense is going to be good. I know there's a lot of excitement around the coaching staff, but you can only fix so much with good coaching. And we saw what happens to Geno Smith behind a bad offensive line last year in a lot of the regressions he had. So we're betting on quarterback play improving and a big bet on offensive line improvement that they haven't really made any major investments in to bring them to a better place.
Yeah. So I think this will probably be the last time I am not talking. I'm not going to say not talking positively, but like defending Ashton Jeanty, because I thought me being, 4 or 5 spots below his running back ADP would be about in line, but you hate him more than me. Marvin Harrison Jr., a rookie that we were both on the exact same page about last year and ended up being exactly right. I have him at wide receiver 19. You have him at wide receiver 31. And, he's turned into like the ultimate, like, I just can't pay attention to anything happening on Twitter as it relates to Marvin Harrison Jr. It's so annoying. Either
a one-handed catch.
Either he's terrible and like he's fat, he can't get open, like not even an NFL receiver, or it's like, oh my God, look at Marvin Harrison Jr. cook. Look at him cook this man. Like, can we just be normal about this guy? You look back at a season in isolation last year, and it really wasn't that bad. I just think it gets categorized as terrible because people thought he was going to be a borderline first-round pick, top 10 wide receiver, and he was not anywhere close to any of those things. He was in the 75th percentile against man coverage, 72nd against zone, and 80th against press and reception perception. So pretty good just looking at the route running chops, which is not a surprise because he was all of those things in college too. It was more of the contested catches and just the catch point that was his issue. And I think that was still an issue for him last season. And he's kind of a little bit like Rome. Rome did move around, but got no layups. Marvin Harrison Jr. both never moved around and never got any layups last year. In his reception perception sampling, about 80% of his snaps were on the outside. About 79% are on the line of scrimmage. So that is as pure X and as static as it gets. And he basically ran no slants no flats. And the slant route was one of his most commonly run routes in college. So I'm going to assume / hope this was a, hey kid, we're not giving you everything year one, but hopefully you're ready for more year two. And because like Harmon compared him to CeeDee Lamb after his rookie year. And, CeeDee Lamb, kind of the transformation in his game came when the Cowboys did start moving him around. Like body wise, they're not exactly the same, but just a lot of their scores are pretty similar. And I do think there is room to move him around. There is room to get him the ball on these flats and screens and slant routes and let him work a little bit in that way. And if that stuff does happen, like, I think he can live up to this rank just fine. I mean, he was wide receiver 29 last year. That's with 2 games where he combined for like 0.9 points. That's with, Kyler Murray being Kyler Murray. He's still going to be Kyler Murray this year, unfortunately. But I'm hoping that just a little bit less static deployment for Marvin Harrison Jr., a little bit of development from him in year 2, and maybe just a little bit of better chemistry between him and Kyler Murray. Like sometimes I think Kyler Murray was just blind and missed him. Sometimes I think probably just the connection wasn't quite there yet. Hoping that we can get a little bit more in all of those areas in year 2.
Yeah, so I'm actually lower on him because I have no hopium. I think he is a very talented player, and I don't disagree with how good he can be. It's that I really wanted Arizona to take some strides with their offense this season. I wanted to see them add some other players around him so he could get off of it. He led the team in wide receiver targets. It's very important because Trey McBride is on that team.
I don't think their weapons are terrible. Like, I like Michael Wilson as a role player. McBride's obviously awesome. It's after those top 3 guys where there is definitely a drop off in the receiver room, no doubt. Well, I think Kyler Murray is my biggest worry, to be honest.
Well, my problem with the lack of change is that they're not like, I don't see why they're going to change their offensive deployments around him and not just continue to stick about at X and say it's year 2, you're going to get better at this. And I didn't want to bet on that. Like, his season is just, it's really bedraggled by them putting him out there at X. One, Kyler Murray faced the 6th highest time to pressure rate, which is going to ruin any X receiver's like ability to be productive in an offense. And they added 1 guard to this offensive lineup, and then they drafted almost entirely defense in this NFL draft. Despite leading the team in targets, he only had 3 games over 100 yards. So as I was going through my rankings, I was like, hey, well, this player, I feel more sure that they're going to be able to produce for me on a weekly basis. When it came to Marvin Harrison, I was like, well, I just need them to be willing to move him around. It's a player I'm willing to be wrong on. Like, if he gets some better route trees, I absolutely think he smashes my rank of 31. But if they leave him out there on an island at X again for another season, I'm just really concerned about it. And I'm really disappointed in general with how the Arizona Cardinals approach this offseason offensively. Like, they didn't add any talent around Kyler Murray. I can't believe the immortal wonder in James Cook is just running it back, and they're just like, we're not going to add another running back to this.
James Conner?
Yeah, James Conner.
James Conner, who had arguably the best year of his career last year.
Yeah, again, insane. And he didn't get injured for the first time ever.
He did at the end of the year because he missed the fantasy championship. Or no, he missed the semis. He played in the champ. Remember that? Like, it was like, is he going to play? Is he not? He suited up and then played for like half a quarter and was done.
Yes. It was the same time Jared Goff went out with an injury for you, and you still won the game.
Against the Panthers. I did not start him in that week. And it was actually Jalen Hurts who got a concussion very early on in the fantasy playoffs.
Yeah. So, I mean, to boil down the differences of this one is you're hoping the Cardinals do something different. And I am too. I just don't think they're going to.
And even if they don't, I do just think like year 2, there is enough room for him to improve to where, like, if he's just left out there to his own devices at the X again, like I said, he was 29 last year with kind of the misconnections with Kyler Murray, with a game with 0.1 and 0.9 points, like 0.7 and 0.9 in 2 different games. I do think like top 24, top 25 receiver, even if the deployment is exactly the same, is very much in play.
would it change your mind if I told you this year's COD was supposed to be really good?
Battlefield 6 looking pretty good. It's already
Yeah.
out. Maybe he's getting the itch out early.
Or maybe he's not connecting with his receiver in camp because he's too busy thinking about Battlefield 6.
Last guy here before we jump out. Tony Pollard. You have him running back 31. I have him running back 22. I think the Tajay Spears rank is where both of us got burned maybe the worst last year. He was my guy for me. I don't remember if he was for you, but you were basically right there with me rank-wise. And Tony Pollard was, just solid as ever last year. Looked a little bit healthier, hoping the same can happen for Isaiah Pacheco this year. A little bit healthier this year, looking a little bit better. What's your deal with Tony Pollard at 31? And if I were a good podcast host, I would see where you have Tajay Spears ranked.
I have him at 32, which is the crux of the entire argument here.
Yeah, so I have Tajay Spears
39.
at 39.
Yeah. So, I mean, really, like, if you brought him up 7 and you brought Tony Pollard down 7, you'd be right where I'm at.
Well, that is how numbers work, yeah.
But what I'm saying is, as I brought Tajay Spears up, I kept digging Tony Pollard because I went back and I looked at last year's stats, and in like almost every advanced metric, Tajay Spears was the better player. He had more yards per target, more yards per carry. He had more positive win rate runs, and he blew up towards the end of the season. He had a couple of those huge reception games, and I do still believe that Tajay Spears is a very, very, very good player, and we just haven't got to see it yet. I think he earned some of the trust of that coaching staff, and I think we get closer to a more even keel split there. And as the season goes on, I really feel like Tajay Spears can take over that backfield, and that I think we're just hitting a swan song for Tony Pollard. He's getting up there in age. And then with both of these guys, I still have a lot of concerns about the Tennessee offensive environment. Can't get much worse than last year, so I can't ding them too highly.
No, honestly, it should be better than last year.
No, it can't at all.
It can always get worse, but it should not get worse.
If it gets worse, that's an all-timer. That's like 2006 Cleveland Browns level bad.
That'd be a pretty tough number 1 overall pick if it does get worse. Put it that way.
I mean, the justification for this ranking is I just think Spears is going to get a little more work. I think he's earned more work, and I had to ding Pollard a bit as a top 24 running back because I don't think he's going to get that kind of workload.
Yeah, I guess my thing was like I'm willing at this point to be wrong and be late to the party on Tajay Spears after trying to do, what I'm doing with Roma Dunze this year. Like my call my shot, like I think he's the better player than Tony Pollard. I'm with you. I still think that. But even when they were both there early on in the season, I mean, Tony Pollard was getting starter reps and Tajay Spears was not. And then Tajay Spears was just banged up the whole season. I know they were both there at the very end of the year last year, and it finally tilted a little bit Tajay Spears' way, but also they were completely out of the picture. Like Tony Pollard had already had a lot of mileage on him in the season. I think he was pretty banged up by the end of the year last year as well. He was still playing, but it was definitely like dealing with injuries. I just need to there's nothing this coaching staff can say that's going to make me change this rank because all they ever say when you ask them about this backfield is, oh, we've got 2-star running backs. Well, that's what they said last year. And then that was clearly not the case. Like right away, it was like, oh, Tony Pollard is definitely ahead in the pecking order. And maybe that is because Tajay Spears is very small and you don't want to give him 14 touches a game. And maybe he's just always going to be the running back 36 who is a top 20 running back. I think I have him 39, so even lower. Maybe he's always going to be the running back 36 who is a top 20 talent in the NFL. That's kind of my worry with him right now until I see his coaching staff trust him with more work and be willing to put him in those situations, and for him just to frankly to stay healthy in doing so.
Tajay Spears was a league winner last year. He was RB5, 10, and 12. In one of those games, he got 20 carries.
I think anyone who he won the league for picked him up off waivers or traded for him, like traded their worst player for him.
And you know what? If they listen to this pod, they could have won their league. But with all this enthusiasm, I do want to just point out, because I've seen that, he ended last season so hot, he's clearly going to be the guy. He ended it against Cincinnati, Indianapolis, and Jacksonville, which are three of the worst run defenses of this season last year. And I've also seen a lot about his splits, and his splits were relatively close to like a 40-60 with Tony Pollard, but you have to weigh in the amount of actual work he was getting on those, and it wasn't that high. He was like 6 or 7 touches per game at a maximum. But
yeah, because he's in there, on third downs more often than Pollard, and he's obviously not getting the ball every third down, whereas the running back is more likely to probably get the ball, running it on first or second down.
Yeah. So I'm just staying cautiously optimistic with Tajay Spears and dinging yet again Tony Pollard for it. And not too long ago, the big ding on Tony Pollard was he just can't handle a full workload. So now Tajay Spears' turn is to be handed the torch from Tony Pollard and get a full workload.
Yeah. The difference now is we've seen Tony Pollard handle it to a pretty good degree, I would say, last year. Like, if you had Tony Pollard, you were largely pretty happy that you had
good,
Tony
not
Pollard.
Great.
Yep, good, not great. And to be the RB22, that's all I need you to be. Good, not great. All right, Dalton, on that note, that is going to do it for episode 173 of the Half Point Per Podcast. Give us a follow Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Half Point Per Pod. We will be back on a weekly cadence the rest of this month, and I think probably the rest of the season. We will have some things to figure out as Dalton travels abroad to start the NFL season this year. Subscribe to the YouTube so you can see when we go live at Half Point Per Podcast. The link to all those things will be in the show notes. As always, our show is available anywhere you listen to podcasts, Spotify and Apple. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and we'll talk to you all again next week.